Welcome to Aligned in Authenticity, soul conversations on alignment, intuition, and living authentically. I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is we tend to group clarity, certainty, and alignment all together. We take them to be synonymous with each other. We think that once I'm clear, then I'll feel certain. And once I feel certain, I can move forward with confidence into alignment. But the more experiences I have and the older I get, the more I realize that clarity, certainty, and alignment are not the same thing. And I think one of the reasons that so many people stay stuck is because they're waiting on something that life was never meant to provide. They're waiting for certainty. They want to know how the story unfolds and how it ends before they're willing to turn the page. So the question becomes, are you actually waiting for clarity or are you waiting for certainty? Because you can have tremendous clarity and have zero certainty. You can know that the relationship no longer fits. You can know that the job isn't fulfilling. You can know that the location is not an energetic match. You can know that there is a dream that is calling to you and just won't leave you alone. But what you don't know is what will happen if you follow that knowing. You don't have certainty. In some of my past videos, I've talked about some decisions I've made in my life. And one of those decisions was, after getting a degree in engineering, to go back to school for fashion design and to go back to school for fashion design clear across the country in Los Angeles. When I was finishing up school for engineering, I knew that I wanted to go back to school for fashion design. And eventually I knew that I wanted to go to Los Angeles. So I had clarity around those things. What I didn't have was certainty on how things would turn out. I didn't know if I would like fashion design school. I didn't know if that would become my career. I didn't know if LA would be a place I enjoyed living and wanted to be at. I didn't have certainty on how my decisions were going to turn out. I recall also when I was going through a divorce, I knew that the relationship was no longer working and that we weren't a good match. However, I didn't know, and what I didn't have certainty around was, if I walked away, would I meet someone else? Would I get married again? Would I end up having the opportunity to still have a family? Those were all things that were unknown and uncertain in the situation. When you follow your inner knowing, certainty of the outcome does not exist. We often think certainty is alignment and we put them together. And we associate stability, routine, predictability, security as being alignment, but they are not the same. You can know where your paycheck is coming from and when it's coming. You can know the person that you're going to go to sleep to each night and wake up to each morning. You can know the routine and your plan for tomorrow and still be deeply unhappy. You can know that it's not aligned, but you stay because it's what's familiar. You stay because you know what to expect. And somewhere along the way, you've made a decision, and it's usually unconscious, that the cost of changing your life and of leaving is too high a cost to pay. But often when we make that decision, we're making it within the time and the space and the moment that we're in right then. And we're not thinking of the cost from a bigger picture. We are often calculating the immediate cost and not the long-term cost. We are looking at the cost of leaving or making a change and the loss associated with those costs, the loss of security, the loss of financial stability, the loss of comfort, the loss of knowing. And then we look at the risk associated with that, the risk of uncertainty, the risk of alienation, the risk of embarrassment, the risk of failure. And we take the cost and we take the risk, and often we think that they are much too high to pay to make a change. And you know what? They are high cost. But what we forget to assess is the cost of staying. The cost when 1 year passes. The cost when 5 years pass. The cost when 10 years pass and nothing has changed. Then the cost was the 10 years. The cost becomes something we can never get back or do over. The cost of time and the cost of your life. And those costs are extremely high costs to pay. You know, in a past video, I told the story of my mom and being in Cleveland with her for a few months. And I recall that time period when, you know, I wanted to start a business and I thought I was going to be able to do that. Like I mentioned before, I ended up back in Cleveland staying with my mom for about 8 to 9 months. And I started out trying to do everything I could to start a business. And eventually the costs became very high for me. And I wanted stability. I wanted comfortability. I wanted to be back in Los Angeles and not in Cleveland. And I decided that the costs were no longer worth it. And so I started looking for jobs again. I started going back into my old pattern of seeking, you know, stability, seeking comfort. And eventually I found a job that put me back in LA, and I moved back, got my own place, went back to being independent. And as I shared, what I didn't know was that a year and a couple of months later, my mom would unexpectedly, suddenly pass away. And when that happened, and I look back on that time, I realized that I thought the costs were high, but actually the cost I paid for going back into the same loop, first of all, not long after I got back into the job, I was miserable again because it wasn't aligned. Yes, I had certainty. Yes, I had financial security and a routine I was able to establish and a place that I lived. But what I didn't have was alignment. And I was deeply unhappy. And then on top of that, once my mom passed, I realized that the cost that I thought was high was actually the cost that was worth paying. So what I say is, when we're in situations and when you weighing the cost versus where you are, don't just look in the immediate moment for immediate gratification, because the cost will always seem like they're less than what they actually are a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later. Those costs significantly add up and become a price that costs you your life. You know, every path and every choice and decision we make has costs associated with it. The question becomes, which cost are you willing to pay? So what I ask you is to picture your life 5 years from now. I'll come to you with the question, did you stay? And you'll say yes. And I'll then ask, what did it cost you?